I am pleased to announce this morning that more than 100,000 Californians have registered as members of the American Independent Party in order to give us assistance in gaining a place on the California ballot in next year's general election. I want to thank the countless thousands of Californians who have done so much to assist us. I point out that these people are representative of millions of Americans who are genuinely concerned about the current direction being followed by our national leadership.
Walking in the sunshine, sing a little sunshine song. Put a smile upon your face as if there's nothing wrong. Think about a good time had a long time ago. Think about forgetting about your worries and your...
The Wallace victory in California did not come easy. When George Wallace brought his Southern-styled campaign to California, he baffled many by what seemed to be too much that did not relate directly to California. Southern traditions and national issues have in the past appeared too much at opposite poles. Apparently, Wallace wasn't bothered that his down-home campaign, complete with gospel singing, bewildered some people. It worked. National news magazines uniformly agreed that by obtaining enough signatures to get on the California primary, Wallace had proven more surely that he headed a significant national political movement, which must be reckoned with. So, while political observers tried to predict his next moves, Wallace kept on moving, talking with people in all parts of California, gaining new strength and support every day. Here was a strong new leadership that excited and pulled at you. Here was a national voice that Californians and millions of Americans could rally behind. Here was George C. Wallace, a new political force in America. Everything said about 48-year-old George Corley Wallace would fill volumes. One constant comment heard, however, whether it be pro or con, is that I admire his courage. Courage is certainly one basis of his appeal, but there's another part too. Wallace is a Southerner who has universal support and appeal that is not clearly obvious at first glance. He communicates. He talks in a language that people can understand, and few politicians can match his uncanny ability to grasp the real issues and concerns of the American people in any area. He is truly a man of the people. It is because of these talents that he caught political observers off balance in 1964 when he captured more than 250,000 votes in the Wisconsin primary. Then, 30% of the Democratic preferential primary vote in Indiana, and 43% of the primary vote in Maryland. But if he is underestimated by some, it's not because he sidesteps any issues. He gets right down to cases.
Last year you voted on the matter of home ownership and property ownership, didn't you? But you voted wrong. According to the pseudo-intellectuals on the court, they struck it down. And both national parties are recommending a law today on the congressional level that would put you in jail without a trial by jury if you didn't want to sell or lease your property to someone. That's been thought up by this intellectual crowd, pseudo-intellectual crowd, who doesn't think you've got sense enough to know who you want to sell or lease your own property to. Another thing they're going to have to be strong about, and which people are concerned over this nation, is the threat to the internal security of our country by the breakdown of law and order. And it's a sad commentary when you cannot walk on the streets or in the parks in the large cities of our country. And if you go out of this building tonight and somebody knocks you in the head, the person who knocks you in the head is out of jail before you get to the hospital, and on Monday morning they will try the policeman. They won't try the person who knocked you in the head. We're going to have to start trying criminals on Monday instead of the policeman in Los Angeles or the policeman anywhere in the country. Supreme Court of our country has handcuffed the police. They have rendered decisions today that are absolutely ludicrous and asinine. Turn people loose every day who are self-proven and confessed murderers of 5 or more people. You read about it, you've seen it. And when they turn somebody loose who's a self-proven murderer of 5 or more people, some pseudo-intellectual tells us that really he's not to blame. Society's to blame because his papa didn't care him to see the Los Angeles Rams play when he was a little boy. And he's mad with folks. And recently we had a case that arose in our state that just culminated in a decision of the Supreme Court that's going to destroy every neighborhood school in California next year. They already started destroying them this last year in Detroit, Chicago, and in New York. And in Washington, they ruled that you got to transport little children across state lines. Now, this decision arising from a case in Alabama is going to take your children and transport them across Torrance to the other side of the city and across the Los Angeles County and the other counties. Now, if you folks in California want to do that, if you want to put your children on a bus every day and send them all the way to Northern California to school and back that night, it is all right with the folks of Alabama. You do just that. You do whatever you want to do, but you decide to do it yourself. Don't let somebody 3,000 miles away sit down and write every guideline for the education of your child. That's all we're talking about. And we had a case last year that arose in Alabama, and we have freedom of choice in our state in which you can choose to go to any school you want to go to regardless of your race. But last year the Justice Department filed a suit and said not enough people on this side of Torrance chose to go to school on this side, and not enough people on this side chose to go to this side of town. Not enough people in Auburn, Alabama chose to go across town to school and vice versa. And we said to the Justice Department, but they could have chosen if they wanted to. What are we going to do about it? Make them go? And their answer was, that's your problem. You work it out. That's your problem. And if you don't work it out, we're going to take the money away from you, which is your money, federal funds, they call it. Not any such thing as federal funds. They're taxpayers' funds. I'm tired of folks saying the state of Alabama gives you some money. You gave the state of Alabama money. You give the state of California money. You give the government in Washington money, and then when they send it back to you, they say, we're going to tell you how you can spend it. We're going to control every domestic institution that you got, and we're going to send foreign aid without any strings attached. We're going to attach a lot of strings to the money that you who paid it into the treasury when you get it back. Well, in that decision, they wrote that we could keep freedom of choice if it worked. And they said if it works, these people got to choose to go over here and vice versa. And if they don't choose, we're going to choose for them. You'll have to assign them yourself and make them go. Now, the point we're trying to raise is you ought to run schools and run them any way you want to. Now, there's another matter that faces our people that everybody has talked about, and there are no simple solutions to. And that's our involvement in Southeast Asia. And we could talk all night here in this auditorium about the matter of the 17th parallel and old French Indochina and the Geneva Accord, but suffice it to say we are in Vietnam, whether you think we ought to be there or not. And 500,000 American servicemen are totally committed at this moment between life and death. And some of them are being killed at this very moment. In fact, I just left a motel where the daughter of the motel owner came by to shake my hand. And 8 months ago, her husband was killed in Vietnam, and she had 2 children. And they're being killed on this night. And one of the first things that we ought to do is reappraise our attitude toward Western Europe and our attitude toward some of our non-communist Asian nations. And by the way, they are doing so much better than are some of those in Western Europe. But Western Europe was rehabilitated after World War II by the money of the people of California and of Alabama, including those nations that we fought. And I'm glad that we do have a stable, rehabilitated Europe insofar as our economy is concerned, because that has been a barrier to further communist encroachment in that part of the world. Even though we sold out the Eastern European nations evidently at Yalta, we still have a strong, viable Western Europe. And they need us and we need them. And I'm not talking about kicking our allies out. I'm just talking about having some eyeball-to-eyeball talk with them above the table and make them respect us more and tell them that it's as much your interest to be in Southeast Asia as it is for us. And if you don't go and help us, and you don't stop trading those of you who do with the North Vietnamese, our enemies, we're going to cut foreign aid off and ask you to pay back that which you've gotten in the past, because the average man... The average man in our country doesn't understand the paying of his money continuously to nations who not only won't help us, but even trade with the North Vietnamese. And we have defended Europe twice. And Mr. de Gaulle in Europe today wants to devalue our dollar by taking gold out of the country, which would impair the monetary system of the free world because it's pegged on the dollar. And it's been devalued enough because of inflationary processes in our own country. And we know what happened to the pound over in England because of socialistic overspending, money that brought no return to the English people. And we'd better get our house in order, or we're going to face that same problem here in these United States. And we ought to tell Mr. de Gaulle, you're not going to impair the dollar, by a concerted effort that you're making, by taking gold out of our country. And if you continue to impair the dollar when you don't have to, we're going to put back on the books some of those billions of dollars that you owe us after World War I and World War II, and we're going to ask you to pay it back because they owe us billions of dollars. And I think that's a common sense approach.
Wallace's victorious California campaign was unique. Nothing like it had ever been accomplished before, although countless groups and interests had tried to gain ballot position and found it impossible. And because it had never been accomplished, unorthodox methods had to be used. For example, small groups of Alabama volunteers commuting to and from California to direct and encourage volunteers. The Wallace campaign started small and grew. More than enough signatures were obtained. This special way of running a campaign was brought about by the unusual nature of California politics. Infighting, while common to all political parties in all states, is rampant in sunny California. Two California politicians, one a Republican and one a Democrat, simultaneously described each other's party members as 2 million chiefs in search of Indians. There were two primary objectives to the campaign: to let Californians know what Governor Wallace stood for, this by radio, television, and newspapers, and secondly, getting voters to sign registration blanks to change their party affiliation. This unique part of the law, making third parties get a certain number of votes to re-register, is a political fact of life because California has closed primaries. This means that in order to vote in a party primary, you can do so only in that party in which you register as a member. Changing your mind means changing your party. And in the Wallace campaign, it all had to be done in less than a 2-month period. This objective has been the target of special legislation throughout the history of California politics. Here, Dr. David G. Ferrari, a PhD teaching political science at the University of California at Los Angeles, comments on the extreme difficulties of getting on the California ballot in the first place and the special roadblocks encountered by the Wallace campaign because of time and circumstance.
6 million people voted for governor. Now, getting 66,000 people to sign up for a new party is a difficult task. It's up to the legislature of the state to determine the minimum size of a party, and I guess it could be argued that California's laws make it very difficult to have a third party going. November and December are not the most political active months. People are thinking about Christmas, Thanksgiving, and so on. This is one obstacle. Secondly, is the strong tradition of a two-party system that we have in the United States, and this is true also in California. Third, certainly, are trying to get people to change their registration from Republican and Democratic to a third party. So there are many obstacles that are faced by third-party candidates in California.
Facing these problems, the Wallace campaigners decided the only way to get voters to sign registration blanks was to have the whole problem of doing so explained to them, quickly and honestly by the only means, individually.
Come on, folks. Come on over and say hello to Governor George C. Wallace. If you'd like to shake hands and chat with him, you can do so. It'll only take a minute to register you if you'd like to register for Governor George C. Wallace. We have registrars that will register you in 1 minute. So put them on a ballot here in California.
California law, in effect in 1968, states that 66,059 voters must re-register to qualify a candidate on a primary ballot. When the campaign kicked off, many political experts said Wallace didn't have the appeal. But as weeks passed and the crowds grew and enthusiasm was obvious, these same experts began reversing their earlier predictions. The campaign kept moving. It was propelled along by the indomitable Wallace spirit and because of the very unique solutions found to the many complex problems by the small but effective Wallace campaign staff. Money is important to any campaign, but to get money, you first must get people willing to give and believe in what they're giving to. The Wallace California campaign started in a political off-season. The 1968 presidential race is far off in the minds of voters. Timing is impossible to manipulate. Then, approaching the January deadline, one of the coldest winter blasts in history hit sunny California. As if unseasonal weather weren't enough, there were the physical problems of working in Southern California itself, home base. From somewhere to anywhere takes a half hour to an hour and a half, depending on the freeways. Then the Wallace campaign staff faced the problems of political tradition, swaying voters away from a long-time party affiliation and doing it with a skeleton staff. It was a maze of problems, where one problem triggers four. Bad weather, no people. No people, no registrations. Then no new followers and no donations. The net total of one valuable day lost. But these are the risks inherent to the very nature of politics. Politics itself is a serious, strategic contest. The born politician relishes both the risks and the strategy. Wallace and his staff have weathered both success and failure. Every politician has. But what makes it appealing are the convictions and the high stakes. People rarely get to see the other side of George Wallace. George Wallace, the man.
Well, I met my wife right after she'd finished high school when she was only 16 years of age. Well, she was very pretty for one thing, and of course I didn't realize how young she was then as I do now, after I've acquired the age that I am, but she was very pretty, and there was just some little twist or sparkle about her that, you know, that's hard to explain. It's just like any man who meets his wife for the first time. There's something about her. She helped me to get my start in political life, politics for me, when I was running for the legislature, and she was too young to vote for me. She didn't even get to vote for me when I was elected to the legislature in 1946. Well, of course, in public service, that is holding legislative office and the executive office of the state of Alabama that I held for 4 years, you are in a position to do things that you thought ought to have been done or should be done for the people of your state. But I also like to go down to the county seat of my little country county, Barber County, Alabama, Clayton, and also to the little town that I was born, raised in, and finished high school, Clow, Alabama, and see friends and to reminisce. And I do occasionally go to the county courthouse, Clayton, Alabama, and sit around, as is the custom in the rural South. I enjoy this immensely, and it's a very stimulating and a rich, warm experience to go back to the country with your hometown friends. I like people, and large or small crowds suit me, and I enjoy being with people.
While the Wallace campaign gathers its momentum, the great majority of support is near home base, Southern California, with 60% of the state's total population. The Los Angeles greater metropolitan area is the home of 7 million persons and provides the greatest number of registrations. It is, according to Wallace campaign staff, the one thing working for them. A small staff precludes blanketing the state completely. It can't be done. While there are valuable registrations from the northern areas, it is impossible to cover the entire state as the southern area can be covered, even with the major difficulties inherent to the region. Statistically speaking, the campaign faced disaster. It couldn't be done, polls and predictions kept saying. But statistics are merely reflections of hard facts, not the whole human story. One part of the real story can be found in the areas dissected statistically. Areas in which the working men live swing easily to Wallace. Bell Gardens, within the county of Los Angeles. Population, 30,000. Democrat, 4-1. By the end of the campaign, Wallace claims more registered voters than the totals in the Democratic and Republican parties. Huntington Park, a residential section bordering an industrial area. Wallace workers open an office and the area swings to Wallace. But response is two-sided. Both Democrat and Republican go for Wallace. For example, in the city of Maywood, December 1966, there are over 4,000 Democrats, nearly 2,000 Republicans. By the end of the campaign, Democrats lose nearly 2,000 of the faithful, while Republicans lose nearly 1,000. The reasons to change appear much alike.
I hereby give my support to Governor George C. Wallace. I feel that Governor Wallace really means what he says when he says that he will keep government in the hands of the individual states, thereby helping each state decide for itself its role in local government.
I am in favor of the nomination of George C. Wallace for the presidential candidate in 1968 because I believe that he is the only man in the political arena today who will stand up for the men in Vietnam to win the war by letting the Joint Chiefs of Staff handle the situation there instead of the political intellectuals in Washington.
I'm from Romania. I lost my country.
Then the minority groups, from refugees to first and second generation.
Our schools, all and paid all minority people to make troubles all over. And I support Governor Wallace because I think he's a good man to save this country from the communists.
Re-registration continues. Strategy from the main office keeps the names coming in constantly. What the strategy boils down to is canvass an area, set up, get as many registrations as possible, then move to the next area. According to some workers, it is very close to trying to be in two places at the same time. There remains one basic problem. There is only one George Wallace. And the physical problems of distance and traffic precludes fewer rallies than Wallace wants. Where Wallace does appear, returns gather momentum, tripling and often quadrupling. Each day becomes a race within itself to cover as much ground as possible. And all the while, there are problems in established areas, new areas, phone calls, meetings, business from Alabama, all important, and each taking valuable time. Morale, enthusiasm, a constant problem in any campaign, and California was no different. High or low, it can ignite anywhere in the campaign organization, spreading quickly from staff to worker. Two primary factors boosted Wallace workers in the Golden State. The realization that the 1968 presidential race is going to be a close one, and the ever-increasing waves of support for Governor Wallace. California law, aimed at keeping new parties out of California, proved not enough to stop the Wallace grassroots movement. Victory in California clearly pointed the way to new successes in other parts of the nation. Already, some political experts were willing to openly state that Governor George C. Wallace could indeed be elected president in 1968. Mathematically speaking, the recognized Wallace strength in southern and border states added up to some 150 electoral votes, a giant stepping stone toward the 270 electoral votes needed to put George Wallace in the White House. And strong grassroots Wallace support in states outside the South, coupled with the simple fact that only slightly more than 1/3 of the popular vote is needed in a three-way race to give a candidate a state's electoral votes, dramatically projected Governor Wallace to the forefront of the 1968 presidential race. With working organizations and already demonstrated voter appeal in states such as Wisconsin, California, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Maryland, the number of electoral votes needed to elect George C. Wallace president in 1968 was clearly within reach. Some so-called experts still remain to be convinced, but one lesson learned by the Wallace campaigners in California was that they shouldn't mind being underestimated, not when you consider the results. George Wallace is in touch with the people. He knows the depth and sincerity of their convictions that there must be a change in our national government's foreign and domestic policies. George Wallace doesn't take time to try to convince the experts. He's too busy talking with the people. He's running. And a new national political movement by the people goes with him, step by step, growing stronger every day.
We are naturally most happy with the results of our California campaign and with the developments in other parts of the country also. The great groundswell of individual citizen interest that we tapped in 1964 in our campaigns in Indiana, Maryland, and Wisconsin has continued to rise, and the registration victory in California here in 1968 dramatically illustrates that this is a national movement which can no longer be denied or brushed under the rug. Given the facts, the people will speak, and with your help, we intend to continue to carry on the fight for local government, for individual liberty and freedom, and for the free enterprise and private property systems. To do so, however, requires money, and I hope that you will join with us in this great effort. Any amount that you can afford will help. The Wallace Campaign Headquarters, 10 High Building, Montgomery, Alabama, handles all contributions, but for quick processing, your contribution should be sent to the Wallace Campaign, P.O. Box 1968, Montgomery, Alabama, 36103. This is one way that you can make sure that your voice is heard and that you have a candidate and a platform that you can support in the presidential race in November. Because today there's not a dime's worth of difference in the National Republican Party and the National Democratic Party and their approach to problems that confront the people of our nation. This is not a personal campaign for George Wallace or a campaign against anyone. It is a true grassroots determination by millions of Americans in every one of the 50 states who, like you, are tired of false promises and the ever-growing centralization of governmental powers in Washington. Now is the time that you can stand up for America. Together we will carry this fight forward with renewed energy and dedication.
Walking in the sunshine, sing a little sunshine song. Walking in the sunshine, sing a little sunshine song.